Do you struggle with alcohol? I'm Andy. This is the Church Basement. Alcohol. Alcohol is an interesting topic for Christians. What you think of it, what you believe about it, about drinking it, too much, too little, all of that. It's all over the place. In some corners of the church, it's taught very black and white. In other places, it's more gray. And some places, it's not even talked about at all. For context, where I am in Wisconsin, you can go to just about any summer festival at a specific kind of church and buy beer. You can buy lots of beer. You can buy all the beer at these festivals. And of course, there are churches that teach absolute abstinence, and then you have everything in between. So the point of this video, up front, I want to be honest, it's not to figure out what is right and wrong and draw some line, similar to how I've approached other struggles, right? I'm talking to the guy who doesn't like where they're at, doesn't like how much he or she is consuming, how often, all that. Again, I'm not trying to convince anyone that they have a problem, but rather this is for someone who worries that they might have a problem or thinks they have a problem or might be thinking, I could someday. Maybe you've struggled in the past or you've come from a long family tree of alcoholics, whatever it is. I thought what I would do is just start this out by sharing my own story and history with alcohol, and then in a separate video, drop a ton of resources to help you out. I started drinking in college. Shocker. In fact, the first week of college was when I had my first beer, and it was also the first time I got drunk. And I remember getting a call from my girlfriend at the time who lived back home, and she started crying on the phone call because I was clearly not myself. And this was probably the first time in my life, first time I got drunk, that I experienced that numbness, physically, emotionally, mentally. And you know what? I really liked it. And during college, I definitely used alcohol to escape, to fit in, to have fun, to party. I liked the way I felt back then. And it seems like a pretty typical experience that you think of when it comes to college. But I did get over the top occasionally. I did experience blackouts. I got sick. I threw up. Things you'd expect when you give a very scrawny kid way too much alcohol. Now, for the record, I don't consider this good behavior or healthy behavior, but I do think it's common for a lot of kids who have never been exposed to alcohol, or they're curious, or they're immature, and they're carrying around some wounds and some baggage. This is the way many young adults deal with life and issues, and looking back, that's exactly what I did. That combined with believing you're only young once and you want to experience life, blah, 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 and you end up just making alcohol part of your day-to-day experience. This is definitely where I was at in college. I lived the typical college party lifestyle. Now, after college is where I see the problems start to emerge. And this is where alcohol became sort of a coping mechanism for me, where I used alcohol more to escape the things I was experiencing that were making me feel all sorts of stuff. I moved to a big city. I was lonely. I didn't really have friends. I wasn't enjoying life at all. My first job out of college was a real adjustment. It sucked. I had this expectation and real life. It just didn't match it. It was just a really, really tough period. I was lonely, depressed, angry, and I didn't know what to do. So I found myself drinking more and more, not to party, but to escape how I felt. I was on my own, on a couch, drunk. Probably a futon. And this sort of became the theme or the pattern in my life. When life was easy or things were good, drinking really wasn't that big of a problem. And then when life got tough and challenging or crappy or stressful, that's when I would turn to alcohol to numb and escape. But back then, I didn't really see this pattern, and I didn't see how drinking was a problem. I saw everyday life as the problem, and my situation and circumstances, that was the real thing to worry about. Those were the things that led to feeling crappy, and feeling crappy sucks, so that's when I drank. When things changed and got better, well, I didn't feel as crappy and didn't drink as much, and things did get better. After this rough patch in life, I moved back home. I enjoyed my job a lot more. I was around friends, and I started to get into things like fitness, and, I focused on taking care of myself. Same period of time, I started going to church, and over the course of a year is when I became a Christian and a follower of Jesus. So mid-20s, I just sort of found some motivation to limit my drinking. I wasn't experiencing the uncomfortable emotions, so there weren't as many triggers. I was trying to get healthy and fit, and I was discovering what it meant to follow Jesus. I had a reason not to drink, and I didn't have a reason to drink. This is when it seemed like my drinking and use of alcohol was all under control. There was the occasional wine with dinner, beer at a baseball game, that sort of thing. It wasn't a big deal. It's during these periods when I felt like alcohol was totally optional, not a problem. But when life got tough, old patterns emerged. And life got tough. I got married, I became a pastor, and eventually became a dad. I didn't know how to do any of these things. It was all new territory, and I stumbled into it, and I failed often, and it was extremely challenging for me. And the problem was really how I felt, stress from trying to do it all, to do better, to nail it, shame from failing to meet the perfect standards I'd set for myself, shame from failing as a husband and a dad, anger because things were just so tough and it wasn't like I expected it to be. I didn't have healthy ways of dealing with this stuff, the stress, emotions, the shame. Alcohol started to become more and more of a go-to for dealing with that, and more accurately, not dealing with it, but rather numbing it. And so drinking became more and more a part of my life, and as a Christian and as a pastor, that led to more and more shame and guilt. I hated it. I hated how I felt back then, and I was becoming stuck in a pattern that I didn't know how to break out of. I remember going to stores worried people might see me buy alcohol, and so I went to stores that were further away from my house, further away from the community to avoid seeing anyone that might recognize me because I had this fear and I had this shame. I was hiding it from my wife more and more. She'd find empty bottles hidden in places in the house or in the garage, and she's like, what's going on? And I wasn't honest with her because I wasn't even honest with myself. That's usually a sign that you have a problem. You're lying. And it took a long time for me to finally say enough is enough and admit that I don't think I should be drinking alcohol anymore. It sort of took a lot more problems being created before I realized I had this problem. And maybe you can relate to that story. Maybe parts of it, maybe things are much worse for you right now. I don't know. But here's what I do know. I have blown up my life. I've bottomed out all of it. I've struggled with many things throughout life. And several struggles really did a number on me. They caused a lot of problems. And alcohol was one of them. It wasn't always that way, though. And when things got bad, alcohol became a way to escape, and everything always got worse. We turn to things like alcohol for a lot of reasons. When we're young, it's curiosity, it's freedom, it's the norm, and it's fun, right? That's what we think at the time. It becomes a part of our lives. But eventually when things get hard, it maybe becomes a bigger piece of our lives that aren't so much about fun, it's more about escape. It becomes something we lean on, depend on, run to when the stress, when the shame, when the anger, when the loneliness, and the depression and the fear all kick in. We might drink to forget. We might drink to not feel. We drink for a lot of reasons that need to be understood and addressed and dealt with. In Alcoholics Anonymous, they say we don't have a drinking problem. We have a solution problem. When alcohol becomes the solution, that's when you know it's the problem. I dive into this in the video, Why Men Struggle, the deeper issues like shame, guilt, despair, all the emotions, the wounds, the pain that ultimately are underneath all our behavior problems. This is the stuff that has to be dealt with. This is the stuff that needs to be acknowledged, confronted, healed, dealt with, and surrendered. There is no lasting change in our behaviors if the underlying problems aren't addressed. The last 7 years, I've been on this journey of recovery and growth and maturity and healing. And part of the change was made possible by getting sober from alcohol. I used to go on this annual camping trip with a group of guys from college. And I remember the first year I went up there where I wasn't drinking anymore. And someone asked me, Andy, why don't you drink anymore? And I said something like, alcohol was getting in the way of me being able to do what I actually wanted to do. And I think that's a pretty good, simple explanation. Alcohol is in the way. There's who I wanted to be, and there's who I was. And I was never going to get there without removing alcohol. When I look back and I think about all of this, I can say with confidence that alcohol was stopping me from growing up. It was hindering me. It was stopping me from being the kind of guy I wanted to be. It was stopping me from being the kind of dad I wanted to be, the husband I wanted to be. It was stopping me from chasing some goals I had. It was hindering my spiritual growth. Everything. Alcohol was in the way. Alcohol was getting in the way of everything I wanted to do and everything I wanted to be. Finally, one random day, I was just like, enough is enough. And I gave it up. No more, no matter what. And since then, no alcohol. I'm extremely grateful I was able to make that choice, and it's been one of the best choices I've made. But it wasn't easy. It never is. And on our own, it is impossible. But with the help of God and others, it's possible. And with a willingness to do whatever it takes, things can change. How do we change? How do we actually get sober? How do we stop? Not only that, what do we need to be doing so we don't drink? How do we trust God? How do we lean on others for support? What's the real problems that we need to deal with so that we don't resort to drinking? So much stuff to cover. In the next video, I'm going to go over some of these things and hit on some important topics. So go check that out because that's going to be way more practical. But I hope you found something in this video that maybe you connected with. If you're someone who's like, yeah, I think alcohol might be a problem. Well, it probably is. But just understand, it's the symptom of a much deeper problem. And that's the stuff that we have to really get into. It's why we struggle. That's it for this video. Check out all the videos that are going to be linked below. If you're enjoying the content, like, subscribe so you don't miss any videos, leave a comment, whatever. Again, I'm Andy. This is the Church Basement. Thanks for watching.